Okay, Chuck, the wait room seems to have slowed down a bit. I'm sure we will still get some more people, but it's 2 minutes after. If you want to go ahead and get started, that would be great.
All right, sounds good. Well, let me go ahead and share my screen and we can just hop right into this. All right, everybody, I hope can see a big blue screen with website workshop at the top. I am Chuck Moran once again from Ball Guy Studio, and I'm really happy to have you all here again. I appreciate your attendance at any and all of these workshops as you've been able to attend. And I'm back again for the third in our and final in our series of workshops about how to build WordPress websites or build websites. And this is going to be focused on self-hosted WordPress websites. So today we're going to be diving into this. I'm going to cover a good deal of territory. This probably won't fill the entire hour and a half, though I've been fooled before with my prediction about how long this will take. But I'm going to cover a number of things today, including how building a website on WordPress is analogous to building a house. I think this is a helpful analogy to see the steps that you need to go through as you're considering building a website. And it's particularly true for self-hosted WordPress websites. Also going to be diving into themes and builders and how to optimize images to help make your website load quickly so that you can provide a really great experience for your visitors. So I always like to start out with a little bit of a history of this revolutionary software, just so we can keep track of what's going on with this amazing software. It's not an exaggeration at all to say that it's revolutionary, because, and as you know, if you've been on any of these other trainings, it really has become the most popular content management system on the planet. So it's worth looking back a little bit, I believe, at the history. So in May of 2003, that's when the initial release came out. This was under the guidance of founders Matt Mullenweg and Mike Little. I'm not sure about Little, but Matt Mullenweg is very much at the helm these days, as he was back at the beginning. May of 2004, this is when version 1.2 came out, and this was when they introduced a significant upgrade, and this was the introduction of the plugin architecture, which is what extends the functionality of WordPress websites. That allowed developers to create all kinds of new things, and as you may remember from before, and we'll cover again today, there's some 50,000 plugins out there extending functionality on WordPress. I have to say that most of them are not worth looking at. There's really a handful, and we're going to cover some of those today. So a new system for working with themes and the ability to add pages and moderate comments came in February of 2005 with WordPress 1.5. And I think this was as a direct result of folks like myself who wanted more capability from the platform so that we could really start to develop websites that we'd been building in HTML, but with this new WordPress system. So WordPress over the years has continued to expand into areas like eCommerce. The plugins have grown exponentially. Image galleries are commonplace. Third-party integrations with pay gateways and that kind of thing are prevalent, and there's just much, much more. By 2013, WordPress had become the most popular content management system in the world. And I find that kind of startling when you think about it, because 2013 seems like a fairly long time ago, but on the other hand, it rapidly dominated the landscape. As I mentioned last week, Gutenberg, which is also known as the block editor, was introduced in 2018 in version 5.0 to mixed reviews, including from myself. But it really has become the backbone way of building websites on WordPress.com, and it's being adopted by people who work on self-hosted WordPress websites as well. So why should you choose self-hosted WordPress websites over WordPress.com? Well, let's take a quick look at the difference. WordPress.com is a service that you subscribe to, and WordPress on self-hosted, the self-hosted site, also known as WordPress.org, is a product that you own. And that is a huge distinction between the two, but let's dive into that a little bit more. WordPress.com really is like renting a house. There are a lot of advantages to renting, as we all know, and there are advantages to owning a house. Self-hosted WordPress websites is much more like owning a house. So WordPress.com on the renting side, this is great for quick setup, just like moving into a furnished apartment kind of thing. You're working inside a safe and closed ecosystem. If you are interested in working with a fairly easy builder, that block builder that we talked about in the session last time, that's the default standard for WordPress.com, fairly easy once you've got your arms around how it works. If you're also not interested in having full control, and this doesn't mean there's anything wrong with not being interested, it's just that you may not be interested in having full control over all aspects of your WordPress website. You may also not want to have to worry about maintenance. That's another advantage to renting an apartment or a house where you've got a landlord that will come by and fix the sink leaks and that kind of thing. The other thing that's extant on WordPress.com is that there are limitations on themes, plugins, and the ability to monetize your site. And if you're okay with those limitations, then you're in the right place to stick with WordPress.com. And of course, you do need to abide by the terms and conditions on WordPress.com. It's probably extremely unlikely that anyone would ever be shut down, but you are inside this enclosed ecosystem. So just like it is with all social media platforms and other platforms, you need to abide by the terms and conditions so that you don't risk being kicked off. So self-hosted WordPress, and I'm using the term WP as shorthand for WordPress here, pretty obvious, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that's what WP stood for. So self-hosted WordPress gives you absolute full control over every aspect of the website from front to back. So everything from choices around where you're hosting all the way through to what type of theme, what type of builder, what type of content, and all those decisions are fully under your control. The software itself is free, which is kind of cool. There are amazing customization capabilities, and we'll be diving into some of those today. Thousands and thousands of themes and plugins are available to help customize your WordPress.org or your self-hosted WordPress website. And of course, this is a really big one. If you're on WordPress.com, there are limitations to how you can monetize. On WordPress.org or the self-hosted side, there are absolutely no limits. You are free to do whatever you want in terms of bringing in income through your website, whether you're selling ads or that kind of thing. Maintenance and security are your responsibility, so you need to know that going in. And there's a lot to learn on WordPress.org websites. And if you're just going in, you need to know that there's a big full landscape that you're going to need to get your arms around. So your self-hosted WordPress website can be considered like a house. It's really a living work in progress. You can add and swap out furnishings to, change the look and feel of what's inside your house. And you can do the same thing with a WordPress.org self-hosted WordPress website as well. And if you ever really wanted to get daring, you could tear down your website and build a brand new one with a completely different look and feel, and do that fairly quickly and with a whole lot less expense than if you were doing that with a house. So if you are going to do it, please know how to do the changeover ahead of time, because switching from one look and feel to another is not trivial, but it's very, very manageable. And always you're going to want to make a full backup. So changing your website is way easier and costs less if you wanted to go from a cool little cottage like this, in terms of the metaphor for homes and houses. You might want to switch over to something that's extremely modern and has a pool. So that's extremely doable on self-hosted WordPress websites. So let's extend this metaphor about building a house and see how that relates to self-hosted WordPress websites. So here's my little doodle. So let's go ahead and build this house. So the very first thing that you would do if you were building a house is get blueprints, right? You would either hire an architect or start with some doodles and that kind of thing to start sketching out what you want. You can certainly buy house plans online. There are all kinds of different ways. But what you want to do is get your plan down first. This is literally the very first thing that you need to do. I know it's tempting to go out and start, halfway through the process, but you really do need to take care of business first. So your doodle can be as simple as this. I've shown this in the past, but it really, you need something that visually describes where you're going with your brand new website. Your content can be in a simple or a more complex document. I do like Google Docs, as I'll talk about here in just a minute. And but the two of these together really are like the blueprints for a house, and we call it a wireframe when we're talking about websites. So I'm going to play this little video here, and this will dive into a little bit more of this discussion we're having right now about blueprints. There are a number of ways to create a wireframe, and whatever works for you is the way that you should do it. So it could be a simple doodle, as I've indicated on the previous slide, plus a very simple outline that you could manage in Google Docs. And by outline, I just mean you could have a heading could be home page, and then the content that you want to write onto that page, maybe along with some indications of where photos might go, that kind of thing. Those two together could be considered your wireframe. You can get more sophisticated if you want by doing something like I did here, where we started for Magnolia Consulting with a Google Doc, and then I brought it into Photoshop and built a complete design around it so that my client could really feel and see what her website was going to look like. And you can see here in this panel, we were doing a little bit of testing with colors. So at this point, we decided what colors to make the headlines and the text. And then I was testing out whether or not to make these icons brown or the white or the dark green color here. So, but this was this is an extremely complete wireframe. And the result is this. This is actually the website, magnoliaconsulting.org. She really wanted to see what her site was going to look like. So this was the result of the final decisions, as well as all the electrons being put together to create a fully and complete website. Here's a look at another way to do your wireframe if you want something really nicely tight and that indicates where text goes in a panel by panel type of idea, but without a whole lot of detail of color and backgrounds and that kind of thing. So this is the wireframe for the Double Dummy movie, and the copywriter that my client hired created this wireframe. It's super nice. This was very helpful in guiding our design. She basically just went down panel by panel on what she wanted on this one-page website, indicating what copy went where, and without getting super specific with what images she wanted in particular places, leaving that up to the design. So that then resulted in the Double Dummy website. This is the fully functioning website at doubledummymovie.com. And as you can see, it maps pretty closely to the wireframe that was set out in that PDF that we were just looking at. But at this point now, it's become a fully fledged website. It's got color backgrounds and actual images, links to the final videos and things that we wanted to include. Colors and all that have been added. Typography choices have been made. So that is another way to manage your wireframe. So wireframes can be a variety of different methods, but it is a really great idea to plan it out because, as you know and you will learn, there is an overwhelming number of choices when it gets to themes and builders and designs, and it's very easy to get distracted. So knowing what you want to do before you go into building your website is a very highly recommended idea. So going back to our analogy of the house versus the website and how the two of them link together, the location, so meaning by location, I'm talking about which state or locality, county, city you're talking about. That's analogous to the hosting company that you're going to choose to build your site on. There are 330,000 hosting companies, and this was back in May of 2019. I would imagine because of COVID, some have gone under and some have cropped up, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of hosting companies. And just like with plugins, they're not all really worth going with. So a lot of them have very recognizable names that I'm sure you all have come in contact with: GoDaddy, Bluehost, HostGator, DreamHost, Ionis, which is also known as 1&1, are some of the ones that are most widely out there. When you are selecting a host or the location for your website, I suggest that you take in a number of things into consideration. Reputation is incredibly important. I put tech support really close to the top of the list because without tech support, you're flapping in the breeze sometimes on getting questions answered. I've actually used hosts in the past that didn't have tech support in the evenings or on weekends, and that's just super frustrating. So you want to make sure that the host that you choose has 24/7, 365 tech support. And then, of course, the fees are part of your decision on what hosting company you want to go with. So next in our building metaphor, the land parcel that we're talking about. So in this case, your lot or your acreage, that is like the account on your hosting company. And of course, you'd set up your account on a hosting company just like you do any other kind of online service. Typically, you will prepay for hosting for something like 1 to 3 years. In a lot of cases, you'll be able to get a discount if you extend out a little bit further. You take a little bit more of a risk by prepaying that much in advance, but if you've made a good decision about what your land parcel is in the first place, then you'll be good to go for 3 years. So this is where you're also going to register your domain if you don't already have one. I do recommend that to the extent possible that you have your domain and your hosting in the same place, just to simplify things. I work with a number of clients that have them in separate places, which is fine, but having them all under one roof with emails about renewals coming in a routine fashion, that's really does help keep you from losing your mind about what's what. I do recommend too that you pay for privacy. This really is relative to your domain in particular, but since I was talking about those here, paying for privacy just means that you're going to pay something like $18 a year to keep your personal information, meaning your office address, your name, your phone number, or your home address if you're working from home and registering it as a personal domain, out of the prying eyes of people who can use that information to send you spam. I literally this week had a client get in touch with me and show me a document that he had just gotten from one of the scammers out there that wanted to transfer his domain from where it is registered over to this other party. And, domains register for around $18 a year. This guy wanted, I think it was $187 a year. And it's a pure scam, but paying for privacy keeps that information from falling into the wrong hands. So Step 4, when you're going to be building a house, you're going to want a really solid foundation. And on the WordPress, on the website side, then WordPress really is rock solid. There's no two ways about it. It's constantly updated for security and functionality. And one thing that you'll find if you do go with self-hosted websites is that most hosting providers will allow you to install the software with one click. When I first started working with WordPress back in the day, it was not one click install, and you had to go through some steps with file transfer protocol, FTP, to be able to install the software and move on from there. It's gotten a whole lot easier now. So house type, this is step 5. This is in your decision process of how to build a WordPress website. And then the analogy on the house side, this is a discussion about whether you want to go with brick or colonial or salt box or a mansion or a cottage. This is the decision on the house side is analogous to the theme, which is what is everything that's covered by the theme is built into all the functionality, look and feel is built into the theme. So you do have some decisions to make. There are 11,000 themes on, this is sort of the granddaddy, the grandmother of all theme hosts. Actually it's themeforest.net. Sorry, that's a typo there. It should say .net. ThemeForest has over 11,000 themes. And once again, there's more than you could ever possibly need. So my recommendations will surface here in just a second. This is the homepage for ThemeForest, and you can go through there. They not only carry themes, but all kinds of other templates, as well as code snippets and that kind of thing to enhance your website. The most popular themes that are out there are Avada and Genesis. Those are available on ThemeForest. Divi, which is it's a distinct and separate website company altogether. It's not carried on ThemeForest, but those three, Avada, Genesis, and Divi, all combined boast a 17% market share. So step 6, your builder, believe it or not, is the same term on both sides. On the house side, your builder is the person that builds your website builds your house. On the website side, the builder is the toolkit that you put your website together with. And of course, there are a variety of different types out there. The toolkit that you use to create your website is built inside the theme. So that builder is actually inside the theme. Some of the themes that you would look at have their own proprietary builders. Some use a commonly used builder, like WP Bakery is one that is used by a number of commercially available themes. This will all make sense in just a minute, believe me. So some of the themes that are out there are that we've talked about, and we'll get into a little bit deeper. Avada and builders both come with pre-made templates to help you get started on your site. So it's kind of a cool landscape out there now, because even though it's a little bit overwhelming, there are numbers of opportunities to start with something that somebody else has already put together for you, that you can go in and swap out content to make it your own. So this is a sketch, or not a sketch, but a screenshot of the back end of the Avada backend builder, and it's panelized. You can see it's very easy to work with in terms of what you see going down the page. And I've got a little video that I'll show you this in greater detail here in just a second. And then the front end is also available as an option for building your site, or I wouldn't say building your site so much as adjusting your site. So a lot of these themes have the ability to work both on the back end, which is the part that people don't see, as well as the front end that people do see, but you can kind of take it offline and make adjustments to it and then save, and then it's live for the next person who comes along. So I'm going to play this little video here that will dive into this subject a little bit more. Thought I'd show you around a little bit in the Avada theme, which is the one that I use primarily. This is one example of a demo that they offer. And the cool thing about Avada is that you can either start with a completely blank slate and build your website from scratch, according to your wireframe, of course, but you can also look at this as a starting place. So this is one of the many demos that they offer. So you can import this into your web server, and it's basically a demo within a theme. So then the builder part is what you manage on the front end or the back end to update the content. So if I were actually logged into this and this were actually under my control, I could log in and change this text here from lorem ipsum over to the text that I actually want. So there are a number of different designs that you can start with and build your website around those particular looks and feels. Now, the thing is, they work great for a guy like me because I've got many different clients in many different kinds of fields. And for you, you're maybe a little bit more restricted. But the cool thing is that you can look through these and see if something sparks your interest that may inform a little bit of how you want to put your wireframe and your design concept together. So I've used Avada in a number of websites. This is one. This is actually using a story brand concept like Double Dummy Movie does. And I won't go through the whole thing, but the TJ site is built on Avada. This one that I'm just launching now is also on Avada. As you can see, there are some similarities, but basically these are extremely personalized and comprehensive websites. Let's see, let's just go over to his About page and take a quick look at that. So he's got a big featured image at the top and then some nice copy and then some drop downs that open up so you can get more information about Tom and his work. So here's another one. This is one that I built with Avada for the Rebecca's Natural Food Store here in Charlottesville. Again, really cool little things that you can do, animations that you can use. Big open white type of design. This is actually the blog into this panel. And this is another little cool technique that you can build in with this particular theme. And then here's another one I built with Avada. I did start with a demo on this one and changed over the copy to make this website look the way you see it now. So that's the theme side of things. Avada is a theme. Divi is a theme. Genesis is a theme. But then inside that, you can work with builders. So you could get an extremely simple theme like Astra, A-S-T-R-A, which very often is coupled with this particular builder. Elementor is a very favorite builder out there that allows you to pretty much drag and drop, as you can see in this animation right here, and create a whole bunch of different types of looks and feels for your particular website. So that's what a builder looks like. On the Avada side, your builder is either in the back end where you're seeing panel by panel and seeing text, or you can also edit on the front end. To illustrate what I'm talking about, here is my Ball Guy Studio website. This is what it looks like on the front end, we call it. And then the back end, I won't go into the edit live to save some time here. So here on the back end is what it looks like as it loads up. You'll see the back end here. So this indicates that I've got a slider at the top. And these are the content boxes that came down below, just below that. Indications of what goes where. So depending on your preference, you can either edit live or on the back end. Most of my clients I teach to edit on the back end on this side so that the complexities that do occur on the edit live side are not confusing to my clients. So there you go. There's a little tour of themes and then builders and how they work together. So moving on to step 7 in building a house and building a website. The next component that I want to discuss here are utilities. So things like electrical, plumbing, internet, those are analogous to the plugins that you put into your home on the utility side and plugins on your website. Plugins are things that are another feature that extend functionality. And so let me give you an example. I mentioned earlier that there are over 50,000. I'd say there are probably, maybe 100 or less, maybe 75 or so that are really worth looking at. And out of that, I tend to keep my plugin count down around 10 max, if at all possible, and less than that if possible. So, but what are plugins? What are some examples of plugins? One thing would be backups. There are a number of different utilities that occur in plugin form that perform backups on the back end of your website. Security, email marketing platform integrations, forms so that you can send content from the website to a particular email address for people to respond to, eCommerce, spam protection, permission settings so that people can come in at different levels. They can either come on as subscribers and get access to certain features. And then if they've got higher levels of access, then you can use permissions to mix and match things that typically WordPress would normally let you do. Image galleries, there are a bunch of different gallery styles out there that you can import with plugins. And of course, social media, there are a number of different ones for sharing icons as well as links out to your own particular social media. A lot of these things are covered with plugins, and there are tons and tons more. So the next step is furnishings and appliances. So furnishings and appliances in a house are things that make your house more enjoyable and more livable, right? Well, on the website side, that's what we call content. So that's where you're going to be adding your text, photos, graphics, and videos. Step 9 on the house side, we're getting near the end. We're getting near the time to invite all our friends over. This is when we can erect a mailbox out on the street and put our street address on there. And that on the website side is analogous to your domain. And so your domain is your own intellectual property. And people do get a little bit confused about your domain. It is distinct from your website. You can have a domain without a website. You can have a website, but you need a domain of some kind to be able to tell people where the thing is. So, but intellectual property means that it's yours. And as long as you're paying for your registration renewals, then it's yours forever. So you can register your domain at the hosting company or through another registrar. And then you can also transfer your domain between registrars. And as I mentioned earlier, I do like the idea of being able to contain everything at one place. And my recommendation is that you transfer your domain into your hosting company so that everything's all in one place. Once your domain has been established, whether it's at the hosting company or not, then you point it to your website in order to launch it. And then you can also get mail in that new mailbox that you just put out on the street. So step 10, this is the fun part. This is the housewarming party, or on the website side, it's the launch. This is when you've done everything. You've done your reviews. You've shared your website in a private manner with people that need to see it, and you're ready to make it live to the world. And by pointing a domain from maybe your old website, if you've got one, to your new one, instantaneously, the new website will come up when somebody types in that domain or clicks on it in an email. And that's definitely something to celebrate. So let's stop here and see if there are any questions, and hopefully I can provide some answers. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask away, or if there's something in the chat that somebody'd like to identify as a question, then I'll do my best to answer those.
Chuck, it looks like Kelly has a question. Is there a wide wireframe template selection available?
Yeah, there are wireframe builders out there. A lot of them are paid, but I would imagine that there are wireframe services that you can subscribe to. I don't typically use those, so I don't have a great deal of experience with them. The template, if you're really looking for a template, my suggestion is to start more back a step. So you really want to start with thinking about what you really want on your website, and that's where that little doodle and a content doc comes in. That said, though, looking at a template might spur some ideas, and so it's certainly something you could take a look for. I just don't use commercially available templates. Any other questions? Let's see, how do you connect your, let's see, Josh is asking, how do you connect your WordPress site to your domain? It's actually a little bit the other way. Okay, so you're basically, the way I think about it is that your WordPress website is a collection of files. So it's essentially HTML and text and images, graphics, videos, and all that stuff, but it's sitting on a web server. And without the domain, it's invisible to the world. It can't be searched. It can't, it's just sitting there. What your domain is something that is, as I mentioned, it's intellectual property, and that could be sitting at the same place as your website or at a different registrar. But what I think about is it's sort of like a weather vane on the top of a barn, and it's pointing toward an old website, or you can go and point it toward the new one. And the way that's managed technically is through a system called DNS, which is Domain Name System. And the domain name system is what you would need to basically change settings on your domain host to point to the new one. So for instance, my favorite host is SiteGround. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. So if I were to build a website on SiteGround, and the client had one existing on GoDaddy, and their domain is on GoDaddy, it would have DNS that pointed internally inside of GoDaddy. At the point where we want to change it to that weather vane to point to the new one on SiteGround, all we have to do is go in and change 2 settings on the DNS, and then it'll point to that new domain.
So my hand's raised, but I don't know if you can see that. I really appreciate everything that you're teaching us. I wish I'd done this over a year ago. But what I'm wondering, like I have a Wix site right now that's set up with a GoDaddy domain name. And I didn't realize when I set up the Wix site this past time that I would have to pay a monthly fee in order to get it to point towards the GoDaddy domain thing. And I'm just wondering, with all that you've taught us, if it would be better for me to scrap it and start over from scratch, or if there was a seamless way to get Wix to talk to another site, or they're not going to make it easy for me to leave them, are they? So
well, it depends partly on what kind of arrangement you've got. Just like with your TV service, your internet service. If you're on contract with Wix, I'm not really familiar with whether they're. I know probably they work like others, where you prepay hosting into the future. If you've only got a couple of months left, or 6 months left, say on your current contract, and you wanted to switch over to something where you've got more control, like the self-hosted WordPress site technology that we're talking about today, it might be a good time to go ahead and start over on new land, right? And then at the point where you want to just point your GoDaddy website from, or your GoDaddy domain from, pointing to Wix to your new website on WordPress, then it would be fairly easy to do. So I'd be happy to talk to you, Frida, offline about your particular situation in terms of how long your contract might be and that kind of thing, so I could help you make a decision about that. But yes, it's entirely doable to start over then you've got to evaluate whether you've got the resources and so on to manage that kind of export and rebuild. I do think that a lot of these platforms, I'm pretty sure Squarespace does this, and I think Wix probably does, that there is a way to export your content and then bring it into a WordPress site. So that's something I would certainly take a look at, because that would save you a lot of copying and pasting. Gotcha. Okay, you're month to month. All right, good, Frida. Well, I'll be in touch. Any other questions? Okie dokie. So let's get back into it. So let's take a look at some key website components now. I'm going to run down a little list here, and then we're going to take a look at these individually. So what I want to cover in this section is the importance of maintenance and security on self-hosted WordPress websites, a set of recommended plugins. This is not going to be an extensive list, but it's a good starting place. We've talked about SEO in both of the previous sessions, but I want to reiterate some of what we've covered. I want to talk a little bit about e-commerce and some of the things you can do to bring e-commerce into your WordPress website, how to capture email addresses so that you can do email marketing, how to upload photos and files. This was something one of you all had asked me about, and I wanted to provide some information. So this is around the idea of people making applications and being able to upload a PDF of an application to a given website, adding videos, whether or not you really want to have a blog. And then I'm going to spend some time at the end of today doing a little bit more of a deep dive on how to optimize images, because it's so freaking crucial to how Google responds to your website when it's crawling your website. And it's also super crucial and getting more so all the time on speed and how fast your website loads up. So let's take a look at these individually. Here's a reality check. The bad guys do want to get access to your website. That's just the reality of what we're living with today. Wix, Squarespace, WordPress, all of them are ultimately hackable. I do believe that the enclosed ecosystems probably have more built-in protections in some ways, depending on the host that you use, if you're talking about self-hosted. So in other words, a crappy host on the self-hosted WordPress side is going to be worse than Squarespace or Wix because it's not really providing enough protection. There's no real enclosed ecosystem. But the crazy thing is, people don't really understand why people want to gain access to your website. It's really not to get a hold of your personal information, get your passwords. In some cases, yes, but they're not looking for credit card information. What they want to do is gain computing power, primarily so they can send out spam. And I know you all are subject to spam like all the rest of us. I got a fabulous offer to take a guy up on some kind of transfer of millions of dollars to my account, but I just had to turn over something or click here, which obviously did not happen. You really can't fully protect your website. This is another reality check. When the US Army site can get hacked, your site can get hacked. So, but what your goal is to harden your site so that the bad guys go next door. This is a really simple way of putting it, but it's just like it is at your home. If you go out and leave your front door unlocked and you leave your keys in your car, you're asking for trouble. So don't ask for trouble. Just lock up, make sure you're doing the basics, and there are ways to enhance the basics, but you want to do that to keep the bad guys moving on to a different target. So let's run down a list of some of the recommended plugins. I put a smiley face on this one because I'm still not apt to move over to the Gutenberg or the block builder that we talked about last time on WordPresscom. It may be forced on us to a certain extent, but I can't imagine that WordPress would actually do that to us. That said, I felt like I wanted to learn it for our session last time, but my favorite editor is still the classic editor, and that is a plugin that you can get from the WordPress repository, no matter what theme builder or anything else you've got on the self-hosted website or WordPress website side. On the security side, my favorite security plugin is WordFence. These guys do a fabulous job, and there is a free version. You can also upgrade to Pro with WordFence. They will send you announcements when people are logging in. So if you're an administrator, you may, and you're the one who's receiving the emails from WordFence, WordFence will tell you that so-and-so is logged in. So you actually get an idea of who they are and if it's somebody that you really did want to have log into your website. Another famous one out there is Securi. I believe both of these, I know this is the case for WordFence. If you do get hacked, then WordFence can be hired to come in and clean up your site. This is not something that I recommend for the faint of heart. I don't do it myself. I hire WordFence if there ever is a hack, which has literally happened in my career twice. And I really love the way they work because they not only clean up the damage to your website, but they will tell you what they did, how the bad guys got in there, what they left behind that caused the damage to your website. For spam protection, this is a new kid on the block. Kismet used to be the one that we went to as a default, but CleanTalk is the one that I really prefer these days. It is a big fat $8 a year for their pro version, and you basically install the plugin and then get an API key from cleantalk.com and paste it in on the WordPress backend, and then it begins to protect your website against spam comments on your blog, as well as comments that would come in on any other portal, typically from forums and that kind of thing. In terms of backups, backup utilities, I do like backup. I should say my favorite is Updraft Plus. That's one I've been using for years. I know a lot of developers are really big on all-in-one migration. I took a quick look at that in preparation for today, and it really does look like a great utility. Excuse me, Backup Buddy has been out there for quite a number of years, and that's another good one, though I'm not that familiar with it. Excuse me. On the e-commerce side, WooCommerce is the granddaddy, grandmama of e-commerce. The difference between WooCommerce and my new favorite, which is WP EasyCart, is that WooCommerce, if you look at it on its surface, it's either free or there is a free version of it. And you think, oh, wow, this is going to be really easy. But to extend functionality, like being able to add in components that manage shipping and sales tax and show up different things on your forms, WooCommerce gets very complicated very quickly. Now, if you just want a super simple site where you're selling t-shirts and mugs and that's it, and you want to keep those in inventory, then WooCommerce may be ideal for you. The cool thing about WP EasyCart is the fact that it's all inclusive. Once you can get a free version of it to get used to it. The Pro is $99 a year, I believe, but there are no other add-ons that you have to get, and their support is really good as well. WooCommerce support is not that great, but there is a huge community of people using WooCommerce since it's been out there so long and is recognized as the standard. On the SEO side, my favorite plugin is Rank Math. That's another new kid on the block. It's getting a lot of good reviews out there. Yoast is the one that's been around forever. Also highly recommendable. And you know, with all of these things, if you look at my set of recommended plugins and you're thinking about which ones you might want to use yourself, just always go to Google and put in like Updraft Plus versus all-in-one migration and read 2 or 3 reviews about that and make your own decision based on what your needs are, considering fees and the other components. So SEO basics. WordPress is search engine friendly by nature. So you go into into your search engine optimization with a very search engine friendly platform to begin with. So search engine optimization basically revolves around discovering keywords that your audience is searching on and then placing those keywords into your website, particularly in blog posts. So in a nutshell, you just want to know what people are looking for and then tell them that they can find it on your website. And the more of that you do, the higher up you show up in the search results. And obviously, using false keywords to gain access is not a good thing. That's known as black hat developing, and you want to stay away from that because Google will not like you for it. As I mentioned previously, I believe in my best practices session on the first day, search engine optimization, or SEO, is a massive, massive industry. It can be extremely daunting to get into, so I do suggest that you start with a beginner's guide. If you are using an SEO plugin or a SEO that's related to a platform like Wix or your GoDaddy builder or Squarespace, they all have their own inbuilt way of managing SEO. If you're on the self-hosted WordPress website and you decide to use Yoast, then look at the how-to docs for Yoast. Outside of those resources, I do suggest these. These are some of the many, many SEO resources that are out there. Search Engine Land is a top one. Moz, I came across a terrific beginner's guide to learn about SEO. And Moz is beginner's guide. If you just want to sort of dive in and get a sense of what search engine optimization is all about, go look, just Google Moz and go to their blog and look for their beginner's guide. Hrefs, which is a term that comes over from code on HTML websites and WordPress websites, actually all websites, is another place that you could go to learn about SEO. Neil Patel is one of the big names out there. He does a lot of trainings around SEO on his blog, so you could check him out. And then SEMrush is one more that I would suggest you take a look at. On the e-commerce side, e-commerce, just in case you don't know what it is, going into the holiday season, you're going to find out if you don't know. I'm sure you all do. I think the bricks and mortar stores are still suffering because of COVID and the fact that Amazon is an Amazon and it has really taken over. But if you, for your particular district, if you're interested in selling either physical or digital products through your website, then the thing that you use is called e-commerce. The plugins that you can typically use, like we talked about a minute ago, are WooCommerce and WP EasyCart. If you're still on Wix or Squarespace, one of those sites, they have inbuilt e-commerce in a lot of cases. Another tool that you can consider that a lot of people don't know about is that you don't have to build your store from scratch. So you can integrate a hosted store like Shopify.com or BigCommerce.com. BigCommerce is really kind of a cool place. So the way that works is that you would go to Shopify or Etsy or BigCommerce. There's another one called Big Cartel or Super Big Cartel, something like that. Those are hosted stores, so they don't really depend on a WordPress website, but you can bring the content into a page. So you can have a link in your navigation that says store or shop, and when you click on that, it looks like all those products are literally sitting on that page, but they're literally actually not. They're sitting on your Shopify store or your BigCommerce. One hesitation that I have encountered recently myself, I got all excited about creating mugs and t-shirts for my online video mastery side hustle, if you will. And the thing that's keeping me back from getting into that is dealing with sales tax. If you've got a bookkeeper or an accountant on staff or access to one that's happy to manage this for you, go for it. If you're selling products into a state do you have what they call a nexus in, meaning some kind of distribution center or that kind of thing, or a partner that has a well-established office, then you do need to collect sales tax in that office, in that state. Typically, other than that, you don't have to, but just dealing with Virginia sales tax by itself is, it's dealing with sales tax. So it's a thing. So email marketing, this is one of the most significant components to having a WordPress website or any website anywhere, I think. And it's often overlooked because we all get annoyed by the spam that's coming into our inboxes. But this is just a great way to stay in touch with your audience and your constituency. To do that, you really don't want to be sending out emails through Outlook or Apple Mail. And I do recommend that you get an email marketing service provider. Some of the top ones out there are ConvertKit, Aweber, ActiveCampaign, MailChimp, Constant Contact. Some of these have been around forever, like MailChimp, Constant Contact. ConvertKit's a little bit newer. That happens to be my favorite. And there's a lot you can do with all of these, to be honest, but they all have various levels of complexity, fees that go with them, and all of that kind of thing. So the way that you get emails from your constituents or people who are visiting your website into ConvertKit or MailChimp is that you embed a form on your website via an integration that comes from the email marketing platform itself or via a plugin. So you've seen these on, in footers on websites or on distinct pages or on contact, where people will say, you can email me or fill out this form to contact us, or join our newsletter to keep up with what we're doing. Adding a lead magnet, AKA an ethical bribe to ask people to give up their email address, is a good thing to do. Obviously, you want to make it valuable. One rule of thumb is to make it something that people would pay for, whether it's $7 or $17 or $37. If you really feel like you're providing value with that particular lead magnet, then that's something that you can build into the process so that people would give up their email address, become part of your email marketing outreach, and then they would get free access to this, to your lead magnet. Some of the ideas that we've covered here, and I often recommend to clients, are how-to lists, how to, the top 10 ways to do things. Sometimes saying the top 5 things not to do is another good way to cover what people might be interested in and be willing to trade their email address for. As I mentioned, I was asked to address this idea of how to upload documents and photos. This would be if somebody, the application here would be if somebody has an application form that they filled out, downloaded, and it became a PDF or a Word doc that they converted to a PDF, but they want to be able to upload it to your website so you can see it, or judge it in a photo contest, that kind of thing, so it can be added to a gallery. Then there are a number of different ways you can manage that. One solution, I think this is a really elegant way to do it, is to use a form development tool called WP Forms. You would have to move up to the Pro version to be able to use the upload feature and then get the upload add-on. Another solution is to embed a hosted form. So this may sound a little bit confusing, but this is a little bit analogous to the Shopify model, so that you would actually buy access to a service like JotForm on jotform.com and then embed that code into your WordPress website, so that seamlessly when people land on that particular web page where your JotForm exists, they would see the JotForm and they wouldn't really be aware that it's actually being hosted someplace else. JotForm is really pretty fantastic. I found some features in there that I couldn't quite believe were possible, but one of them, for instance, is if I were taking a tour of a new house, let's say that I was thinking about buying, and I wanted to send a picture of the kitchen or the playroom to someone else to review, I could take a picture right on my iPhone or my smartphone and upload it through JotForm so that it went right back up to the website. It actually gets hosted on JotForm. So there are a number of different solutions for doing that, either built into the website through something like WP Forms or through a hosted external website. Adding videos to your website, don't do it. Super short clips are okay. The reason for this is that web servers are not video servers. They're just designed and have software on them that are not really designed to kick out videos. Videos do take up a lot of bandwidth, and so it really is best to host your videos on a service like YouTube or Vimeo. The advantage there are numbers of them. One of them is that people can find your other videos easily. So if you've got a YouTube channel with a lot of your educational videos, you can embed those on your website one at a time in different places. But then if people click through to your YouTube channel, then they can see all of your educational videos at once and make a decision about which other ones that they might want to take a look at. Was that somebody have a question there? Maybe not. Okay. So this also does save on bandwidth. Your hosting company will have limits on how much bandwidth, and this is just the transference of content from your website to the browser on the other end. So if you've got 100 people looking at a video that you're hosting on your website, that's eating up a whole lot of bandwidth, as opposed to having it hosted on YouTube or Vimeo and just having a little article of code on your WordPress website so that it's actually showing on your WordPress website, but it's not using bandwidth in anywhere near the same way that it would be if it was hosted on your website. And as we've discussed before, slow loading websites are punished in search. Google is famous for this. If your website takes 12 seconds to load when the average needs to be 7 or 8 seconds, you will get pushed down in the search results, which is obviously not a good thing. So that's another reason not to host a video directly on your website. So should you have a blog? We've talked about this a little bit in the past. Oops, go back up here. Sorry about that. The answer is yes, but you do need to commit resources for content generation and come up with a plan for writing and posting frequency. This isn't something to go into on a willy-nilly sort of basis, like, hey, I'm just going to put up a really cool blog about this and then walk away from it. That said, I'm not that great at blogging myself. I will admit that, but I really do recommend that if you're going to go into blogging, that you do it on a professional type of basis with a real plan in place. Blogging really does provide valuable information to your stakeholders. It enhances your brand. And as we've talked about before, embedding keywords into your blog posts that's a really great way to optimize for search engines to be able to find you, which of course drives traffic back to your website. Another thing that you can do with a blog is that you can send out your email newsletter once you've got an email marketing platform set up with excerpts and links to your blog posts. So you might send out a digest once a month in your email, but you've got 4 blog posts or 3 or 2 that are listed on that email newsletter, just with a little excerpt so people can get an idea of what the blog post is about. And then when they click on it, they will wind up on your website. And of course, that is a way to drive traffic back to your website. So spend a little bit of time here at the end on optimizing images. This is the last section that we're going to cover. Just so you know, the way I define optimizing images is a combination of delivering the smallest possible image file size without losing quality, and while containing the file name, title, and alt text terms that enhance your SEO. So don't get confused or worried about some of that terminology. I'm going to go into it a little bit here so that it's a little bit more understandable. If you optimize your images, that will speed up your website. And if you don't optimize your images for file size, then you're going to slow down your website. We've talked about how Google doesn't like that and what they do about it. And I like to think about this as forcing a watermelon through a snake. You just don't want to do that. And what I'm talking about is that if you have a 3 megabyte file image that came off of your iPhone that literally, if you were to look at it printed, would be, wider than I can reach, 3, 4, or 5 megabytes, and you just upload that willy-nilly to your WordPress website, then when somebody comes to look at that, yes, it will fit into the frame that you've embedded it in. So that might be a 900 pixel wide website box, but the internet is going to have to deal with that entire watermelon, that entire 3 megabyte file, and sending it through that connection to that person's browser on the other end that you're trying to share something with is going to slow the connection down. The connection will be slowed down because of the size of that watermelon going through the snake. So we've talked about how slow sites are punished by Google for providing a bad user experience. I thought this was interesting. I came across this study from an organization called Strange Loop. Strange name, Strange Loop. Anyway, they came out with a study that showed that a 1-second delay in load time can incur 11% fewer page views and result in a 16% decrease in customer satisfaction. That's a 1-second delay. So people just are not going to hang around for longer than 7 or 8 seconds on desktop, and they're not going to hang around for longer than 3 or 4 seconds on mobile. So you've got to optimize your images for those. Large files also take up space on your server. So you are given a certain amount of gigs of server space when you get a WordPress website, a WordPress.org or self-hosted website. And the more junk that you put in there that's not optimized, the more you're going to get to the top of your limit, and you will have to upgrade or go in there and clean those babies up by reducing them or getting rid of them. They also will take up space in all of your backups. So the more extraneous, bloated web images that you've got in there, the longer or the more space your backups are going to take. So let's take a quick look at image file formats. You really should stick to these. Use JPEGs for photos, PNGs, that's the default standard these days for simple graphics and images with transparent backgrounds. I'll show you an example here in a second. And then animated images, you should be using GIFs for those. I know people say GIFs, I'm old school, and so don't hold it against me when I say GIFs. And yes, I know that's also the peanut butter, but I say GIFs, and you can say whichever one you want, and I'm fine with it. So this is what a PNG with a transparent background looks like. The reason for this is that you may want to put it over a field of color, so that color will actually come through wherever there is a transparent background. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is when you've got a new image off of your phone or your camera or your however you capture an image, you want to resize them first. I tend to work in Photoshop, but there are a lot of utilities out there. One online service is called GIMP. This is not Mac or PC. It's available for both. It's basically an alternative to Photoshop. On the Mac, you can use Preview. There are you can Google tutorials about how to use Preview to resize images, but it's really pretty simple. On the Windows side, you can use the inbuilt Photos application or Microsoft Paint to make your images smaller. I tend to make my images a little bit larger than the space that they're going to occupy on the website. This, again, I always feel like if I've got a 900 pixel box and I make my image 1200 pixels, when it gets squished down a little bit, it's not taking up that much extra room, and I'm guaranteeing a little bit better experience although it's probably imperceptible, but I just feel better making them a little bit larger. So the example that I was just using is using a 1200 pixel wide image when it's been resized to go into a 900 pixel box on the website. So then the next step is to compress your images. And here too, I tend to use Photoshop first. And I've got another utility that I use, but I have a way within Photoshop of reducing the image size as well as compressing it down to a smaller size, all in one fell swoop. GIMP also will allow you to compress your images. On the Mac, there's a great utility that you can download for free called Image Optim. If you have questions about how to use Image Optim and what settings to use, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to show you some screenshots of how to set up Image Optim. Online, this is a really terrific platform called TinyPNG. You get free access to a number of reductions or compressions before they start charging you. And basically either tinypng.com or tinyjpg.com will take you to the same platform. And well, I wanted to show you the results of a TinyPNG compression example. So I took an original, this is literally a test that I conducted. I took an original off of Unsplash. .com, and the original was 4,789 pixels wide by 3,193 pixels deep, tall meaning, and the size was 1.2 megabytes. Now, interestingly, that size, physical size, and the megabytes that it takes up those stats are fairly compatible with what you would get off of your iPhone or your Android device. The phones that we have in our pockets are taking really big pictures these days, you guys, unless you have the settings set to take smaller ones. So I uploaded this large image that's oversized for a website and too big file size wise at the 1.2 megabytes into TinyPNG. And what I got back from TinyPNG was the same size. In other words, the physical size was still 4789 by 3193. But the file size had been compressed down to 362 kilobytes. This is within the range of what you want for your website. I generally try to keep all images under 500 kilobytes, if at all possible, which is a half a meg. And so it's really, in this particular case, TinyPNG reduced it by 69%. You can also then go into Photoshop and resize and optimize it from there. But starting over, let me go back to this idea of taking this larger one, the 4789 larger image that I got off of Unsplash. I reduced it in Photoshop down to 1200 by 800 pixels. Okay, so that means I probably am planning to put it into a 900 pixel wide box on my website. And natively, when I exported it out of Photoshop, it had already dropped down to 112.6 kilobytes. So it was now nice and small just by going through Photoshop. It had already been resized size-wise and optimized for the size that the file was. And then I uploaded it to TinyPNG to see what would happen. And again, it came back at 1200 by 800, but now from 112 kilobytes, it had reduced down to 88.7 kilobytes, which resulted in a 21% further reduction. So I thought this was interesting. I just wanted to show you these side by side. So this is the image. Of course, it's smaller on this particular slide, but if you saw the original, it's 1200 by 800 pixels at 112 kilobytes. Then I reduced it and I compressed it on TinyPNG, and this is the resulting image that is now 89 kilobytes, resulting in that 21% further reduction. So you don't necessarily have to use a combination of Photoshop with TinyPNG. but you do need to find a way to get your physical size of your images down to something much closer to where they're going to appear on your website, and then compress them. So there are compression plugins too. You can compress images as you upload them. So after you've made the physical size smaller, then you can basically install a plugin like Optimal, which is an interesting new one I wasn't familiar with, but discovered it recently. This will handle multiple sizes, multiple tasks for you. In other words, it will manage the size reduction, physical size reduction, as well as the file size reduction. And I think this is another one of those where you've got to, may get a number of free ones, and then you have to upgrade to the Pro. This one's got the weirdest name out there. I've never really understood why they called it this, but it's the EWWW Image Optimizer, but it's another very popular one. Imagify is another compression plugin that you can install on your WordPress website. And basically what happens is that as you upload an image to your WordPress website, it goes through this plugin, and the plugin says, okay, this is too big. Let's go ahead and make it smaller. So it does the compression for you. Another sort of new kid on the block is the short pixel image optimizer, and a lot of people really do like that one. Another one with a funny name is WP Smush, or Smush as you prefer, and that one's out there for your use as well. So optimizing your images for SEO now, we've talked about file size and physical size. Now we're talking about optimizing for search engine optimization. You can upload your images to your WordPress website directly through a blog post or a page. So in other words, you've got a box that you want to put something in, you select it and then install an image in it, and that puts it up into your media library. And unless you've optimized for SEO to going in, you're going to wind up with an image up there that has a funky file name like image_4828.jpg, whereas it's much better to write caption style texts for your file names. And I'll get into a little bit more here in a second of how else you can use those. But writing an actual caption like Specialist Amanda Pearson makes topsoil improvement recommendations to a local producer, that type of caption is going to go a lot further in helping people understand what's going on with your website. The title is not as important as the alt text field. The alt text field is extremely important for a number of reasons. One is that people with visual impairments actually have a website read to them through a device called the JAWS reader. And so if it gets down to an image, I have never experienced one, but I would imagine it gets down to an image, and it's going to be much better for it to read to me, Specialist Amanda Pearson makes, that entire caption, rather than telling me that it's a JPEG by reading me the file name. The other thing too is that the alt text field, sometimes the title field, but alt text field is what you see when you mouse over an image on a website, and that little tooltip pops up to read to print out the title of the image that you're looking at. One simple way to manage all this, and this is what I recommend to my clients, is write those captions instead of the JPG type of title, and use that in all three of the fields. So in other words, it's your file name, so it would be Specialist Amanda Pearson, blah, blah, blah. It does have to end with JPG for the file name, but then use that same caption for your title and your alt text field, and you're good to go. It's a nice, simple way of doing things. Closing out now, hosting is obviously going to be really crucial, both for your website delivery and for your own peace of mind and sanity going into hosting your own website on WordPress. That's why I've got a favorite that I'll recommend here in a second. Tech support, again, is super crucial to me, not just because I'm a developer, but I think everybody should be concerned about the level of tech support. These are the people who will dig you out of a hole or help you with your website has suddenly gone to the white screen of death and you have no idea what to do, make sure that you've got tech support at your host that is there for you 24/7 and 365. You also want to have a hosting company that has fast servers and current software and ones that are set up for a heavy duty dose of security. This is something that's built around the hosting platform that your host has. Crappier hosting companies have crappier security, so you want to stay away from those. My recommendation is an organization called SiteGround, and I have moved all of my clients' websites over there. Any new client that I pick up goes onto SiteGround because they are just tops. This is an affiliate link. They send me a little thank you for people who sign up through that particular link. People who sign up through that particular link don't pay any more. It's the same, but I get thanked for bringing people over. SiteGround, I was asked by a blogger in Europe a couple of years ago to submit my favorite hosting platform for a blog post that he was doing. And he got results from about 90 of us around the world. So they were from Asia and from Europe. And interestingly, we could put in up to 2 or 3, maybe 4 hosts. So if we were, we like SiteGround, but we also like GoDaddy, Bluehost, HostGator, we could put all of those in there. And then he tabulated the results. And interestingly enough, SiteGround came out on top for all things, tech support, fees, the whole 9 yards, among 90 of us web developers. So closing out here, next steps and thank you. We have covered a lot through this series of workshops. Make sure you go back and review things as needed. And, we started with best practices on day 1. That's up on YouTube or will be soon. And last week we covered WordPresscom and the block editor. So if you're interested in the block editor, it's all in that particular video. So you might want to go back and look at that if you're interested in learning about the block editor. So your decisions are to either keep what you have or build a new website, but whatever platform your site is on, Wix, Squarespace, WordPress, just remember you've got this. So as I've closed out previously, make sure you just set up what you've got to do, but then chew off little bits, make little successes, and then you can go from there and get the job done. Please do contact me at chuck@ballguystudio.com. I also am willing to do a free site review for you. Just head over to ballguystudio.com/free consultation. If you forget that or have a hard time finding your way back to this particular screen, just go to baldguystudio.com and free consultation is up in the navigation on my website. So I'm going to stop here and see if there are any additional questions, and we will be done with this workshop.
Okay, Chuck, it looks like there are 3 questions. One we missed earlier.
Okay.
Can you tell me more about Elementor?
Yeah, Elementor is a terrific standalone builder. So you need to have some kind of theme, but I've seen people use Elementor with simple themes like the one that I mentioned out there called Astra. It's used with a couple of other very simple themes. It's even used basically with the WordPress theme that comes with, if you install WordPress with that one-click install on your server, you will get 2 or 3 default WordPress themes. They tend to go by your name. So it's the 2021 theme, the 2019, 2020 theme. Nobody ever uses those themes. They're just super basic, but you can use them to work with Elementor. So the steps would be to install WordPress. You will get a simple theme like 2019 or 2020. Then you will add the Elementor plugin, and now you can basically, it's just the builder, Elementor builder is using the theme that's underneath it so that you can drag and drop and create pages and build some really exquisite websites.
Okay, thank you. It looks like the next one is, what defines a super short clip? As in, what's the max that would be okay?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would there's no absolute defined limit on it. If you have a video clip like the one that we have on Double Dummy, I would first of all run it through a utility like Handbrake to make it smaller without using and losing any of the quality. But I would say generally that if your clip is something like 2 or 3 megabytes, that it would be okay to upload that to your and host that on your WordPress website. Anything over 2 megs or so, I would put on YouTube.
Okay, and let's see, saving Windows snipping tool will result in a small JPEG. What do you think of Windows snipping tool for images?
I wish I could tell you. I have been a Mac guy since 1985. I can't even spell PC. I'm sorry. I don't know anything about the snipping tool. I know that I can imagine what it is. I'm familiar with the term, but it doesn't sound to me like it's a great tool because I'm not sure about the resolution that comes with it. You don't want to do anything that will reduce resolution as you're reducing your file size. That said, I'm not familiar with the snipping tool, so it may be fine for that.
And that is all the questions that we have in the chat box. If anyone has any questions, you can take yourself off mute and ask, or type it in the chat box, whichever you prefer. I'll just give you a minute to do that before we wrap up.
I guess I did it. Covered the waterfront.
Yep, there you go.
Okay.
Doesn't look like there are any other questions.
Yeah. Well, feel free to reach out if anybody has questions for me. I'm happy to answer them if I can.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You
Thanks, Chuck.
too. Thank you. Bye-bye.